Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Switch for Good podcast. I am your host, Dotsie Bausch, alongside my wonderful co-host, Alexandra Paul. And I've missed you, girl. It's been a few weeks.
I know. Every so often we take off a couple weeks, mostly because we're so organized. We're many shows ahead.
It's because of you. She drives a hard deal here, you guys.
No. We're a great team because we're both very driven by this topic and our podcast. We're very excited about it. And there's so many good people to speak with.
I know.
Like our guest today.
So what have you been doing? I know you've been missing me,
yes.
A, and
Foremost.
B, what have you been up to?
Well, I'm shooting a movie, and so I did a wardrobe fitting yesterday, and I was really we talked about this with one of our guests, Gianna Simone, who's also an actress, about the dilemma of being a vegan and an actor. And luckily, this movie, they use a lot of vintage clothes. So I was all older stuff, and none of it was leather. So that I brought my own shoes. So that was great.
Fabulous.
Yeah, that worked really well. And also I mean, when I talk about vintage, by the way, I, Alexandra, don't wear any leather, even if it's vintage. I know there are some vegans who will wear clothes that are leather if they've been used before, because
they're already in existence.
Philosophy is, and throwing them away doesn't help the animal. But so anyway, on a film that I'm a little more lenient on the film, as we discussed with Gianna. Mm-hmm. I will wear something that has animals in it if it doesn't scream to the audience that it has animals in it, for example. But usually I request, and people are very happy to do it, is to purchase clothes that don't have leather, wool, or silk in them. But this movie was the first movie in which the producer said, no, we're not going to put that clause in your contract that you normally have, which is that no makeup be tested on animals. It's probably because my part is pretty small in this. So I was able to speak to the makeup artist and just ask her if she could, just whatever cruelty-free makeup she had, I would like to use that. And then, of course, I'm going to bring my own.
Yeah.
So
and you said she was really, really sweet and very cool about that.
Yeah. And I think it's not it's like she'd heard it before.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yay.
So that's what's great.
Yeah.
And 20 years ago wouldn't have been that. The same thing. They used to just get all nervous and call me and, is this good makeup? Is this? And that kind of thing. But nowadays,
what are some cruelty-free makeup brands that we can tell people about?
Well, I use Gabriel Cosmetics for I have so little makeup, but I use Gabriel Cosmetics for my moisturizer, and then I use Beauty Counter for an SPF, which also is, like we talked about, doesn't have a lot of chemicals in it. And what do you use, Dotsie? Your makeup is always beautiful.
I like Fresh a lot for all I use almost their whole line.
Oh, Fresh. It sounds clean too.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is we talked last week about me being in jail for a couple of days. Well, there was one activist who was obviously vegan, and her makeup stayed on for 24 hours. And I said to her, what makeup do you have? Because I think I still see your lipstick and your eyeshadow is still on. She said, oh yeah, it's called Elf. Have you heard of Elf?
No.
I think it's called Elf. Well, anyway, so for stay on for a long time makeup, I think it was called Elf, and it's very inexpensive too, because a lot of activists don't have any money, so it's perfect. Also, and it stays on when you're in jail.
Okay, bonus right here, people. All right, we're going to move from makeup back to food, because that's our favorite topic.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yes, vegan food.
We have a fabulous guest I want to tell you guys about, and then I got to share how she and I met, because we became fast friends. But our guest today is living proof that no matter what path you head down in life, you can always change course. So many of us launch into a career at a young age and then later find out, as I did, that it's not what we truly want to do, but we feel stuck often. Our guest today, Dr. Nadja Pinnavaia, I'm pretty sure I screwed that up, but I tried. She holds a PhD in quantum chemistry and served as a managing director at Goldman Sachs. But we're not going to interview her today for her financial advice, although we could. I find her fascinating because of her seemingly innate ability to seek out her soul's passion and drive towards that with gusto and a fierce drive for success. She made a hard pivot in her career and founded Plantable, a plant-based meal delivery program that emphasizes feel-good, nutrient-dense food. Nadja understands that most people feel controlled by foods, and Plantable is her way of breaking those bonds. Plus, it's not every day we have a guest who will cook for us every single night. So we're grateful for that. Welcome, Nadia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dotsie. Thank you, Alexandra, for having me on. I'm so thrilled and delighted, and I love your show. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. So tell us, Dotsie, how did you two meet?
Yes. Well, Nadia, you're joining us from WeWork in Lower Manhattan, right? Do I recognize the backdrop as that? Okay, because I've been there to visit.
You've been here.
But we got to meet and hang out last fall, and were brought together by the producers of The Game Changers. And I had the joy and the pleasure to go to New York to be with Nadja and be on a panel that she was hosting. And it was a conversation discussion about, plant-based foods, nutrient density, and, inflammatory response in specifically in athletes. Obviously, we showed a couple of scenes from The Game Changers. And she had done an experiment with a mostly paleo trainer, a physical trainer, physical coach, from, what was the gym that he was out of?
Chelsea Piers in Brooklyn.
Right.
From Chelsea. He was the head trainer.
He was the head trainer there, and his name is Oscar. And so Nadja had been trying to get him to go plant-based for a little while, and he was very resistant, like, no, this is crazy, no, this is crazy, no, this is crazy. And then you finally said, okay, just for this period of time, and I will give you every single meal. So you don't have to do a thing. There's no work involved. And he was just kind of like, all right, already, this woman is driving me bananas. And I can do anything.
I wouldn't leave. I wouldn't leave the gym unless he said, okay, I'll do it.
And I'm not going to steal the rest of the story because you lived it, but please tell a little bit about Oscar's journey, and then I would love for you to share what happened to his blood at the end, because to me that's the most fascinating part of his transformation.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. So as Dotsie said, I reached out to Chelsea Piers as to a number of these gyms because, plant-based eating improves performance. And I think what you guys did on The Game Changers is brilliant in spreading that message. And so I was introduced to the manager of Chelsea Piers, and he said, well, it's not to do with me. And then I kept getting passed down the pipe, and then ultimately got to Oscar, and Oscar said, okay, I'll do it. And he loved it. So he went plant-based for 2 weeks. So as Dotsie said, we gave him the food, but we also gave him the education and the coaching, because we do lunches and dinners. But we said, Oscar, here's what you're going to do for breakfast. I'll stay with you. Here's the oat milk you're going to buy, or the pea milk. I think he ended up going with pea milk in the end. And we're going to kind of be with you on this journey. And we had him use the InBody right at the beginning. So take his anthropometric measurements of his weight, his body fat composition, his muscle mass composition. He also took blood work, as you mentioned. And then and then we just monitored him. So he was with us for 2 weeks. But the miracle of all of this is he just got into it so much, and he loved it, and he stayed plant-based. So within 4 weeks, he's a fit guy. He's 6'2", very handsome, very fit. And I don't think he'll mind me sharing his data, but he had a 15.6% fat, percentage body fat, which is very lean, and 96 pounds of muscle mass. And 4 weeks later had dropped 11 pounds, but not 1 pound had come from muscle mass. His body fat had gone from 15% down to 10.6%. It was amazing. He felt fitter, he had more energy, and now he's brought that into his training with all of his clients.
Yeah, when I saw him, he looked like a fit, lean, chiseled machine. And it just, like we know, he was just resonating, just his whole being with the thrill of the plant-based
Right.
lifestyle. You know, you just don't get like that with any other air quotes diet. Right. You're like, oh, yeah, I'm losing weight. Things are cool. Here we go. Trudge. But he just is like, you know, it seemed like he couldn't get enough of it. And he was just on the panel, you know, just wanting to share the message so much with a probably mostly not plant-based audience, which was what the beauty was of the panel that you put together. Yeah.
Yeah.
And did he have a change in any of his blood markers? Were you able to?
So he had, he'd looked at his inflammation and that had dropped. But that's something that we've actually monitored with a number of our clients that have been through the program. So we encourage them to take cholesterol, in particular LDL, inflammation, high sensitivity C-reactive protein. I know you had a big show on inflammation the other day. And then A1C, so blood sugar, hemoglobin A1C. And unanimously, all of those markers, if they're elevated, they drop. So we constantly see the reversal of pre-diabetes, which is a massive epidemic now, within 28 days. And again, you know, our job is not just to do this for 28 days, but bring people into this lifestyle and help get the cravings out of their system and bring them into education, and then the tools to carry on eating this way after that. So reversal of prediabetes and really staving off diabetes in the future. Reversal of type 2 diabetes within 3 months, and that's really, really cool. And we take people off statins. Average LDL reduction is 41 points. That's equivalent to one 20 to 40 milligram, Lipitor pill. And then we see a reduction in high sensitivity C-reactive protein. So if you're in that chronic phase, boom, it goes right down, which Dotsie, you observed on the Game Changers, which is ultimately, I think, the differentiator of all these diets, because to steal Mark Bittman's thunder here, there are plenty of diets where you will lose weight and your markers improve, cholera being one of them, but not everyone wants to have cholera. But I think the beauty is that with a plant-based diet, you see that the reduction of inflammation, which is not something that we see with the paleo and the keto that long-term are inflammatory as a way of eating.
And then there's also something else, which is some people relate it to something akin to spirituality, but there's a change in how you look at the world or how you feel about the creatures around us. And I wondered if Oscar mentioned anything like that, or
like an awakening.
Yeah.
Of sorts.
Yeah.
In a way, yeah.
It is. I think there is, it's so important, this coming together, and Dr. It's one of the things that you and I discussed when we last saw one another. You've got this health aspect, you've got the environment, and you've got society and animals. And it's so beautiful bringing those three together, because when you start to care about one, they're all interrelated. Our health, the planet, animals, what we do to animals, it's all interrelated. So I'm not sure that on that evening he spoke exactly to animals, but I think one naturally becomes far more measured and mindful and thoughtful about what we're doing and putting into our mouths. We've seen that time and time again with people that have been through our program, that not everyone sticks to a solely plant-based diet, but there is a drastic reduction in consumption of animal-based products. Dairy being huge. I think introducing people to life without dairy, I think it's hard to get people off that. It's highly palatable. And now I think as well, with everything that's taking place in the consumer packaged goods world, we're getting more alternative products to market, and there's a lot of press about that, so that's a great thing. But I think also getting the meat and bringing in those other alternatives in a way that is easy to do then drastically limits the consumption of meat.
Mm-hmm. So I'd love to speaking of awakening, to go back a little bit in your life from what I shared about you in the introduction, and I'm sure you were hard charging as the rest of them at Goldman Sachs, working whatever it was, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week it seems, and your awakening out of that space and into this plant-based space yourself, not just as a business, but yourself, and your athleticism, because you are a marathon runner, Miss Thing. So we don't want to leave that out either. Take us through your awakening.
Yeah. Well, my awakening journey happened initially. The catalyst was cancer, was health. In terms of my background, despite my very British accent, I'm Italian. But I lost my father when I was very young. I was 10. He died of an aneurysm. And then I lost my mother to breast cancer when a number of years ago. And then I moved to the States 12 years ago, and my mother-in-law, whom I'm very close to because I don't have my own parents, was diagnosed with kidney cancer. And having been through the loss, I thought, oh no, not again, and didn't want to just rely on that, let's hope the chemo works, let's keep our fingers crossed. And so picked up, and I actually have it here, Dr. Servan Schreiber's The Anti-Cancer Diet, really looking to do something to help her, to be useful, to do something. And I started reading about today's modern diet, of the overconsumption of sugar, of dairy, of meat, of processed foods, and how it wasn't just empty calories, but it really was inflammatory, weakening our immune system, which was lowering the protection that we have naturally throughout our lifetime to stave off cancer cell progression, and also fueling cancer cell progression if we actually did have cancer. And at the same time, I also learned about the addiction that we have to food, thanks to big food, what they've done to us, the sugar, the fat, the salt, the processing power, the dairy all put in to make things highly palatable. And I realized that there was this big kind of lie of eat less, move more was not the solution, but the solution is to switch what we eat. And so at that point, it was enough for me to leave my career in finance. When I moved to the States, I'd left Goldman Sachs and set up this company, which was about working with the big consumer packaged goods brands of transforming some of their sleeping brands. And we'd been asked to come in and look at one of the weight management shakes, the kind of one of the grounding brands on shakes. And as I got more into weight management, I realized that, this wasn't the solution. So I left this private equity company. I said, I can't do this. I'm not putting my name behind a philosophy that is scientifically unproven. And by the way, I have a PhD in quantum chemistry, so I can be quite geeky. I really got into the academics of it all and started reading all these academic papers, got really into it. And I said no. And I took 6 months off, and I read every single New York Times bestseller book that was out there. Fat Chance, Joel Furman, the China Study, all of those books at the time. And everyone's got their spin, clearly, because they have to have a slightly new angle. But it all came down to this is about eating a nutrient-dense diet, to eating more plants, to reducing sugar, reducing the refined grains, reducing the processed foods, and eating more fiber. Where do we get fiber? In plants. And I created this company as a means to help people transition into this place, really, because the kernel is, if you're addicted to this modern diet, it can be hard. It's just as it's hard to say to the smoker, you shouldn't smoke, it's bad for you. They come to the point the smoker realizes that, but actually we're there to hold their hand, education and coaching, and actually the meals, so people go, my God, I never thought an eggplant could taste so good. This is delicious. Who knew? And then they want to actually carry on eating this way. They're full, in which case the brain then isn't always naturally pinging them to eat more processed foods and more kind of crap, if it's okay to say that word.
What was your diet at the time?
My diet, I was an omnivore at the time. And then over that summer when I started reading, I started changing my diet. And I guess it was the summer 3 or 4 years ago. And it was really funny that people started saying to me, like, what are you doing? You look amazing. And I wasn't doing anything different apart from I had changed my diet. And so for me, it was more of a gradual transition into, going to the farmer's market. It was summer out in Long Island and buying these vegetables, learning how to cook farro the first time. I'm Italian. I know how to cook pasta. Like, what is quinoa? How do you make this stuff? And transitioning away from the meat and eating more vegetables. And then before starting the company, as Dotsie said, we initially did this pilot. I did it in my kitchen, so I had to figure out pretty quickly how to cook in this way. And so there began my journey. And so it was a journey of learning and a journey of just feeling good through food. And then once you get there, you don't really want to go back. And that was my personal journey.
So your mother-in-law, what happened?
She made it.
And did you it was all the power of food, or was it a little Eastern and Western medicine combined in the power of food, or what was it?
There was it was the power of both. There was she was treated at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and I have to say they took her to the brink, but they saved her life. It was a very aggressive cancer, but they saved her life, and she's, healthy and in good shape.
And she's eating mostly plant-based, I would assume, by this point?
She does. I mean, she also did have a good diet to start with.
Okay.
But I think there's been a modification in that. And especially because I'm a daughter-in-law, so I'm always around. And actually my father-in-law has done it. My mother-in-law's brother has done it. So I'm penetrating Texas that really aren't, my parents all live in New York City, but their families, they're all Texans. So slowly, I'm working my way through Texas.
So Plantable, there are several different programs that people can from which people can choose, but you deliver meals to people who sign up. Why? What's the need that you saw there mainly that made you think, okay, it's a food delivery service. That's how I'm going to help people get healthier and eat more plants?
Yeah, I mean, I see it more really as it's a program, and actually the education and coaching is as important as the meals. The reason, Alexandra, when I created this, I thought I have to give people the meals is because it can be overwhelming. Because let's start again at the addiction. You're asking someone to change a habit. You're asking someone to change something that they enjoy doing, that they want to carry on doing. Like in the ideal world, most people that come to Plantable would be very happy to carry on living in that way. So it's a slightly different angle. So we're dealing with a lot of people that are coming for a catalyst, whether it's health, whether it's more superficial. It's empowering my performance, just like Oscar. I mean, Oscar's kind of catalyst was, all right, I want to get you out of the gym, but really was, I want to test, can I be a better athlete? And so if you put all of that change on them at the beginning, it can be overwhelming. So that's number one. Number two, I think people sometimes confuse a plant-based diet with, I'm going to have to eat salad all day long. And if you're not giving people enough plant-based protein, enough nutrients, enough good-for-you fat, or even calories for that matter, then they are going to be hungry and wanting, and they'll go back. This isn't about willpower. This is about giving the brain and the body what it needs. And so, again, I got geeky into this. If you are eating a whole food plant-based diet, because we're talking about, good for you carbohydrates and a lot of fiber and a lot of plant-based protein and good for you fat, you are changing your hormonal responses. You're increasing leptin, which is the satiety hormone. You're dampening insulin, which is the fat storage hormone. And so in doing so, you're also dampening ghrelin, which is the eat more hunger hormone. So what we're really doing is using those meals. I hate to say kind of food as medicine because it's overused, but it's food as a pill to keep you full, so that when that 2:30 voice comes a-calling, or most commonly the Haagen-Dazs at 10 o'clock at night comes calling, we've given people the nutrition that they need during the day to make it easier to isolate what we call the addictive voice. And so for the prefrontal cortex, the kind of the rational side of the brain, to overrule the basal ganglia that's saying, eat more, eat this. So the food is there for ease and convenience, but also for a reason to keep people full. And so they experience what it is to eat this way.
I love
and
that.
broaden their palate as well.
I'm so interested in habit change as a coach myself, that I feel that this is such a great way for people to make the transition, because if it's hard they won't be able to do it. So you're trying to make it as easy and pleasurable as possible in that beginning period where it's so hard to make a change, to change a habit. It's the beginning. The body keeps going, I want what you had last week and the last 3 years, because that was fine. You survived, and so I don't want this new thing. And so that's when the brain really will work to keep you from making a healthy change. So what these services do is help make it so it's easier to overcome that voice, like you said.
And changing the chemistry so that the cravings are changed, which is, the biggest part of the battle in terms of food.
Right.
How else do you integrate your science background into your work with creating this wonderful food for people?
Well, it was interesting because I did this May pilot, back in 2015, because I'd read all these books and said, well, what actually happens? Because you can, read the odd anecdotal story. And I did this pilot, as I said, and most of that cooking I did myself with I was doing a course at the Natural Gourmet Institute, so I had a couple of trainee chefs that were helping out. And then when we saw the results of this it was actually a group of 11, it was 10 people plus one control person who already ate in this way. And she didn't really change at all, but the other 10 had all of the results that we spoke to. So, and by the way, it's worth mentioning what those results are because they are so consistent in what happens in 28 days. So average weight loss, 8.9 pounds. And most interestingly, that is a pretty consistent across the 3 BMI groups. So if you're normal BMI, you lose 6 pounds because this isn't about losing weight or calorie restriction. It's about the improvement in health, which releases, all of the stored adipose tissue, the fat and the water that's there. So anyway, 6 pounds and 9.5 and then like 12 or something across the 3 BMI groups. We had people take the blood test, which we spoke about earlier, and saw all of those reductions. So once I saw those results, I thought, gosh, this really does work. And so I hired an amazing chef who used to be the chef. Her name is Nikki Bennett. She used to be the chef at Pure Food and Wine, which I don't know if you're both familiar with, but it was a very famous New York City restaurant, one of the first in kind of pure, raw vegan food. A fabulous cook, but as we spoke about earlier, the food has to be delicious, and I'm Italian, so food is a passion to me, and it has to taste good. But it also needs to ensure that there's enough protein in it and all of the, enough of the macronutrients group to make sure people aren't hungry. So working with Nikki, we kind of evolved and made sure that, she was the creativity and, this tastes gorgeous and it's wonderful. And my always thing was that, well, where's the protein? Now, how do we get more protein in it? And so I guess I applied, and that's your question, Dotsie, I kind of applied my science background to really getting into a lot, and I'm not a registered dietitian, but learning a lot about nutrition, what it does to the body, and making sure we were bringing that. Secondly, because I am kind of more science-based, I reached out to a physician, quite a well-known cardiologist at Weill Cornell, who is plant-based himself, and he says, Nadja, I spend 7 hours a week talking to my patients about diet and how they need to change, and they say, yes, doctor, and they leave, and they don't do it, because it's hard, as we just discussed. And he said, how can I help you? And I said, I'd like you, please, to open up your laboratory to do blood work, because I wanted to continue to collect that blood work. So that's another side. And an extension of that is we've worked with a number of cardiologists and endocrinologists across Weill Cornell. And actually, I'm really excited that we're about to start a clinical trial with breast cancer, which is kind of near and dear to my heart, with Memorial Sloan Kettering. And it's amazing to see these highly academic medical institutions now taking a plant-based diet seriously and wanting to do randomized controlled trials, because that is the only way that we can provide the kind of the support, the scientific support, and in order to prove that this is an effective solution, in order to go head-to-head with a medical community that doesn't necessarily want to accept lifestyle medicine.
Wow, it'd be great if hospitals would have your quality of food in them, or secondarily, if they don't have, if it's too expensive for them, then at least for people with breast cancer and other cancers to know what foods they can order from. There's a place where they can get, I mean, probably when they go home, they don't feel like cooking either, but there's a place they can continue healing themselves at home.
Right. For the breast cancer, the no animal estrogen-based menu here at your local hospital would be a place to start.
It's breast cancer, it's prostate. In fact, I think I'm hoping, fingers crossed, we'll be doing a trial in prostate. It is ovarian, it is pancreatic and endometrial. Those are uterine. Very, very driven by, or very impacted, I should say, by today's modern diet.
I'm interested when you talked about the coaching aspect of your company, because most food delivery services just deliver food, whatever kind of food it is, but you go a step further to help people not get actually off your program so they can go ahead in life and continue on a plant-based diet, healthy plant-based diet, with whole foods themselves. Can you talk a little bit about how your coaching works and what your philosophy, how you help people change?
Yeah, totally. So when people sign up, they are onboarded. So they receive a link to say set up a 20-minute, telephone conversation with your coach. And that team of coaches is me. We have people here. So if you get really unlucky, you might get me. And in that 20 minutes, we really spend that time understanding the person's routine and their goals and their catalyst for bringing them into this transition. What are they looking to achieve? And then giving them the tools outside of those meals to how to bring this lifestyle into their home. So as I said, we do lunches and dinners, and that was purposeful because I want people to take responsibility. So, for example, breakfast is something that should take 3 minutes. We're all creatures of habit. We all tend to want to eat the same thing for breakfast in the morning. And you don't really need someone else necessarily to ship that over to you. So let's help give people those right choices and a selection of choices. So part of our coaching and education is, look, we have a book. These are suggestions of things that will keep you full and satiated and get you off the sugar, get you off the dairy first thing in the morning. And oh gosh, there was this massive period where I was speaking to people and they were having the obsession with egg white turkey omelets, because there's that whole protein thing. And I can't have the yolk because that's got fat in it. But I'm going to have, 5 or 6 egg whites and this, turkey everywhere. So educating people and giving them an easy breakfast solution. And then explaining the program. We always say, look, you're responsible for putting a crunchy side salad with the evening meal. Think of us as doing the heavy lifting in the kitchen that would take you a long time. But you're going to take some responsibility. And here's a shopping list. Here, tick off the things versus the suggestions because we're transitioning you. So there's that's part kind of education and practical. And then, Alexandra, as you know, then there's the psychological component. There's the, look, we're here for you. We want to see you be successful. If you're struggling, if you don't know what to make, if you're going out to a restaurant at lunchtime, send us the menu, send us where you're going, and we'll, literally within a minute, we reply back and say, here are some suggestions of what to eat, or if not, ask them to do these things for you. So we're giving people the tools to stay a step ahead, to keep them in this 28-day lifestyle experience. And a lot of it is, in any coaching, is support, is knowing that someone who cares, a real person is there at the other end of the line, especially that 10 o'clock, that evening thing. It's a huge deal. And sometimes people text us, and sometimes they don't have to, just because they know that we're there anyway. And if they texted us, we're kind of there to support them.
You mentioned
check in with them.
You mentioned 2:30 and 2:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. Are those the areas where people tend to get more vulnerable to eating off track?
Yeah, it's the 2:30. It's after lunch. Mm-hmm. It's the pre-dinner. If they're having a late dinner, kind of an 8 o'clock dinner, there's the snacking from 6 till dinner time. And then the big one is after dinner. It's 10 o'clock before, or they go to bed very late. Part of what we're doing as well is bringing people back into a routine. Like, the brain loves habits. And the downside is it doesn't like to change a habit. But the good news is it's really quick at making a new habit. So that's why we spend time understanding, well, what's your routine? Because if you can have a breakfast at whatever time you have to, because that's the time you have to wake up, then have that breakfast and then have your early lunch. But that's a 4-hour metabolic cycle. You should be able to last that if you've had a really good breakfast in the morning, which is full of nutrient-dense, plant-based breakfast. And then come mid-afternoon, if you have that boredom or if it is hunger, you have that mid-afternoon snack. Plantable approves some raw nuts or whatever it is, some hummus and some carrot sticks. And then if you can, you have your early dinner. And then you're done because you're actually full. And so then we try and get people as well to try and get to bed a bit earlier. So we're taking on a lot, but that's why you come out with these 28 days. It's as if you've been to Canyon Ranch for 28 days. You feel fabulous and you've reset not just your food cravings, but also some routine. So that's why when people say it's a food delivery, it's not a food delivery. It's kind of Canyon Ranch in your own home. It's Canyon Ranch or a kind of plant-based cocoon. I don't know what the equivalent is. That's what we're trying to bring that experience into your home.
I want to go back to breakfast because you went right by that as far as what it would be. So 10 years ago, I was that 5 egg white turkey omelet person. And I am savory 100% of the time. Like I don't want anything sweet in the morning or almost ever. And so needing that savory in the morning, I learned moving over to plant-based that it was, as you're speaking of, the macronutrients and the micronutrients, not the fact that the protein came from an animal. It's just the protein in general that I felt very satiated by and not hungry for a while. So can you give people a couple of options, preferably not oatmeal, because that's not going to resonate with me, that would be that morning savory packed full of the micros and macros that you want?
Yeah, totally. So my favorite is a slice of Ezekiel bread. It's very low glycemic. It's sprouted, the orange one, sprouted Ezekiel bread. Avocado smushed on it. I put hemp seeds on it, and I top it with baby spinach leaves. That's my go-to breakfast every day. When I run out of avocado, you know how disappointing when you go to the supermarket and they're all hard. And you go, what am I going to have for breakfast? I love, and that, so I don't know if we use this as a suggestion because it might be too far out for people on that kind of, that first entry point. I think we introduce it later on. But I love refried beans as well. So organic refried beans, I put that on. That gives me some protein. It fills me up. So similar kind of thing on the avocado toast. We do have a suggestion for the oatmeal with, old-fashioned oats with made with some berries, keeping any added sugar out. We are no added sugar in our program at all. And with, oat milk or introducing people into plant-based milks. We also give a smoothie recipe. I'm not a huge smoothie fan because I think people tend to put a lot of fruit in smoothies. So our smoothie is very heavy on the leaves and the vegetables with some peanut butter in there. So those are some examples of some of those recipes that we suggest.
Do you not like fruit?
What do you have for breakfast?
Do you not like fruit, Nadja? Do you feel it's unhealthy?
No, I don't know. I'm a fan of fruit. What we're trying to do on our program, though, is also, as Dotsie mentioned, try and curb those cravings down.
Which are mostly sugar cravings, right?
Yeah. And so if you start the morning with, if you're used to having a sugary breakfast or a sweet breakfast, and then you replace it with a lot of fruit, you're still getting that dopamine hit, the spike, and then you're often hungry at 10:30. So one of our big challenges is getting people to enjoy a savory breakfast. So yes, we say add some berries and a little bit of banana, but for example, we had a lady who had cut out on the she cut down on the sugar, and then went to Trader Joe's and bought those dried mango bags. And she chomped her way through like half a bag of dried mango. And I remember kind of calculating the grams of sugar in it and saying, yes, it's healthier, yes, than drinking like 3 cans of Coke, but you're still a junkie. So, again, what we're trying to do is get people into a more whole food, plant-based way of eating with a reduction of sugar.
And change that brain chemistry up.
Yeah, and people are pretty resistant about their breakfasts because, like you said, it kind of sets their day. And so I have clients who are pretty resistant. And I myself have a little Alexandra Paul story in terms of her breakfast. My nutritionist a long time ago, Nadja, some background, I really struggle with sugar also. So I understand what you're saying and appreciate that. So many of your clients also do struggle and that you have an understanding of that. But my nutritionist was trying to get me off my muffin in the morning, and I literally wept when she said I couldn't have it. Yes, I did, because I said, what am I going to eat?
What kind of muffin
were you
eating?
Over. It was not. It was probably chocolate chip, knowing me.
Okay.
It was a long time ago. And guess what? Now, just because I've reset my habits, I haven't had a muffin because actually it doesn't make me feel good afterwards. I haven't had a muffin for, 15 years or something at all, really.
Yeah.
So
you bring such a good point up of how it makes you feel. And I think, Nadja, that's something great that you can speak to in doing what you do, but also knowing so much of the, documented science and chemistry behind it is connecting for the first time in some of our lives with how something makes us feel, because we just zombie through food, and especially quick food when we're in a hurry
the feeling
and we're in a
right
rush.
then.
Yeah, we just don't want to feel hungry, and we just whatever, want that hit or whatever it might be for you, what your fix is. But we very, very oftentimes don't eat a certain meal or even a certain food and feel how I feel on a run after I've eaten a banana. Versus, I don't know, what else, a piece of toast with peanut butter. And, as an athlete, I started to become a bit closer to that, just really from a digestion perspective early on. Wasn't thinking this deeply in terms of micronutrients and how they were going to affect an output, but just that I was going to be able to digest somewhat seamlessly so that I wasn't having to, my body wasn't having to spend the time and the energy digesting, and it was spending the time and the energy on my output. I mean, that was kind of how I thought. I just don't want the digestion to be complicated. But what have you seen from people in terms of if they actually take that time and that energy for themselves and practicing that self-care in saying, this lunch that you sent made me feel like this? What is that transformation like for them?
It is an amazing transformation. I wish somehow, we could capture the emails, the phone calls, the passion that people have when they say, "Oh my God, you've changed my life." And it comes from men and it comes from women, and it comes, I think, from a slightly different angle. I think this is a bit of a stereotype, but bear with me, I'm sure we all kind of agree. As women, there's pressure on what do we look like and our weight, and are we heavy, and we have to diet, and this and that. That kind of rode at our self-esteem over the years of, well, why can't I be this person I want to? And she was actually on the pilot. She was a neighbor of mine when we first did it, and after that first week, she sat me down and she said, "Nadja, you've restored my self-esteem." Because even just in that 1 week, she felt better and she felt that she'd be able to succeed. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier, Dotsie, when, thinking about kind of the difference of how we feel. If you go fully immersive, and this is kind of a key about what we do, and frankly, I think it scares a lot of people off. They go, well, maybe I'll just dabble. But you're in it. So if you go fully immersive, after 1, 2, 3 days, and certainly after 7 days, you feel different. And that's when you go, oh my God, this is easier than I thought it was going to be, because I feel great. And now my brain is starting to say, actually, I want to carry on feeling this way. And so I think it gives women power as well to say, I can do this. And so it's amazing. It's amazing what happens, I think, psychologically in the first week. Now, I will say that there are some people that struggle more and they find it hard and a challenge. And Alexandra, to your point, I think the biggest issue that we combat is the sugar addiction and just how strong that can be with those people that truly are addicted. It is hard. But in that first week, you feel better and the results speak for themselves. This is not about weight loss, but if weight loss is one of your parameters and you step on that scale after 7 days, you've got a big difference on your hands. And so that's reinforcing the change that's taking place. So I just think it's amazing. It's amazing, the change. And that's why I think we have a chance of really converting people into a different lifestyle, because once you feel good, once you can, then you go back to the muffin for breakfast and you go, oh, actually, that doesn't make me feel so good. It becomes easier to stick in a certain way. And people will test it. They'll go like, oh, I'll try a bit of that again with my old friend. It's a bit like, I often say, it's a bit like the ex-boyfriend. You're quite fond of him, but then, you have a drink with him and you go, oh, yeah, well, thank God I'm not going out with you anymore.
That's a good comparison.
That's great. That's great. Now, what about for our listeners who can't afford to have food delivered and coaching? What kind of advice can you give to them from what you've learned from Plantable and your work with so many people on how they can make changes in their lives?
Yeah. Well, number one, as a premise, if you look at our medical results and what we do, this should be subsidized and on prescriptions that are paid for by insurance, right? Because if metformin is and it holds your insulin steady and stable, Plantable should be absolutely subsidized. And that's actually something that in doing these clinical trials, we're setting ourselves up for. So, that is my ultimate goal, that this is given the medical validity that it deserves. What can people do? I think breaking it down into easy steps to do. I do think that breakfast, just starting off on the right footing on a breakfast is so important, because if we can get people off the spike, the insulin spike, and then the crash in the morning, then which means hunger at 10:30, and you get them into a nutrient-dense, plant-based breakfast in the morning, they'll feel great. So that's already 1 meal out of 3, and they're avoiding the snack. So I think that's a big thing. I think introducing whole grains is great. I feel
a lot of people are very afraid about whole grains because they have gluten in them.
Right. So, and clearly there are people that have celiac and there are people that have a gluten intolerance, but so many people that come to Plantable, whether they do it themselves, if you're having spelt or barley, you don't get that bloat and that distension that you do if you're having the ultra-refined grains. So a lot of the discomfort that's being experienced is from the processing of grains rather than a whole grain. And what worries me slightly in this kind of gluten-free shift is we're going into, highly processed brown rice flour or rice flour, which is full of sugar and other additives in order to hold it together and make it palatable. So, have some farro instead. So introducing people into whole grains. I love beans. I think beans and lentils are just so massively underrated. And when we talk about the expense, I mean, if we think back at how, as I said, I'm Italian, the original Mediterranean diet was a pauper diet, right? It wasn't an expensive diet. There wasn't a huge amount of meat and dairy in it because people didn't eat that way. But it was beans and vegetables. And so get people into beans, and lentils are delicious and they're full of protein. Like, there's an amazing marketing angle there of, let's bring people into eating more lentils and beans. So I think that's an important thing as well. And giving them other tricks, like avocado. There are some people that don't like avocado, but it's very rare, and it's a wonderful thing. It makes everything taste good. So, throw some avocado in it. And so I think also giving people some tips and tools, keeping them full, trying to dispel this thing. I always say it's so hard to kind of undo what we've been taught from an early age, right? Doctor, you guys know this. Like, you need milk for your bones. You need meat for protein. Like, even though rationally you can present the science, people don't want to believe it. They go, no, but I still need to drink my glass of milk. No, you don't. And so giving people other kind of alternatives supported by the science, but ultimately it's about making things easy for people to get them into this space.
Yeah, and real quick, speaking of the gluten, if you have what you feel like is an intolerant to some type of food, if you're having maybe some congestion or waking up with a runny nose or a sneezy nose, or you have constipation or bloat, I say, and so many of the doctors that have been on, take out the dairy before you take out the gluten, because just the data tells us 1 to 2% of the population has celiac disease. About 4 to 5% of the population has a gluten intolerance. 65% of the population has an intolerance to dairy foods. So that's probably going to be the culprit. So flip it, try the other way, and see if those symptoms subside first.
Totally.
With the dairy.
Totally. And the dairy is a massive inflammatory, the mucus and all those things. It's huge. We see that.
Yeah. So
it's amazing. I'm sorry. I know we all know this, but it is amazing what happens to people once they go into this lifestyle. It is the biggest miracle, probably second to childbirth, but the biggest miracle that's out there of how quickly the body wants to heal itself. Right? Because what is it doing? It's healing, and it's saying thank you. And then everything else is easy. You don't have to watch your weight. Unless you go really crazy with a box of cashews in front of you, you can eat. There's freedom. And that's what I love, bringing people into this new way of just feeling free, not being on a diet, not being hungry, not having to count calories, because that's rubbish. Just having people feel free and not be trapped in the sugar processed food cycle.
So to wrap this up, can you give us some of your recipes so that people, even if they can't afford you specifically, although I encourage people to go to your site to take a look, but what you're making so that it'll inspire them to make it also, and show them that there's a huge variety of vegan foods out there, plant-based, whole foods that are yummy and satisfying.
Like a simple lunch and a simple dinner.
Yeah, or even some of your quiches, she has quiches and soups.
Right.
We have a lot of, so I actually think the easiest meal, and it's actually one of our favorites at Plantable, is it's called the zialina sugo, and it's the sauce that my aunt makes in Italy, and it's tomato sauce. But what we do is we blend, and anyone can do this at home. And in fact, if you Google the Today Show and Plantable, that Chanel Jones was one of the hosts. Her children loved this, and she came into our kitchen and actually made it. So it was that easy, and she never cooked. But it's basically, you put a couple of carrots in the Vitamix or the blender, add some onions. I actually also add some zucchini in there as well. And you blend it up. And then you do, chop a little bit of onion and garlic with a tiny bit of olive oil. And then you throw the pommes tomato sauce, so you're not making the complete, the ready-made sauce. You just buy the tomato sauce. And then you put in the blend of the carrots and the vegetables in it, because that gives the natural sweetness, right, from the carrots. And then you cook it for a little bit, you season it, and then I throw in some frozen peas, because you've got the protein in the peas. And then I top that on, and you let it cook a little bit, and then I top that on red lentil pasta, which I think now the bean pastas are getting more and more sophisticated. They're getting delicious. There's actually a company out of Italy that's going to be coming to America soon, and their cannellini bean pasta tastes like normal pasta. So even kids, they're like, oh, it's green, or it's red, I won't eat it. They won't know. And it's amazing. And if you look at the macronutrients of that, if you look at the nutritional analysis, it is one of the most perfect meals. I think it has about 25 grams of protein in it from the peas and the lentil pasta. It's got with vitamin A, E, and K. It's an amazing meal, and it's so easy. And you can make a whole stash of it, and it costs nothing. So that's kind of my easy go-to. Dotsie, you should talk about your Olympic bowl that's actually just coming onto the menu, Dotsie's Olympic bowl.
You have a bowl named after you. How cool.
I want you tell about it, because it's you guys created it. I didn't. I just gave you some tips.
Yeah. Well, it was inspired by you. So we have some marinated tempeh, and then we have a whole variety of vegetables in it. And it's just, I mean, Dotsie came into our kitchen and she made it, and then the chef took it over. So it's, sauteing and throwing. I think we've got beans in there as well. And again, it's called
garbanzo.
the Olympic bowl because it's inspired by Dotsie, but it's high in protein. And it comes with a tahini sauce on top. So you can just, top it with tahini, and, tahini makes everything taste fabulous. So that's it. And we actually serve it with some red pepper quinoa.
And it has 26 grams of protein, right? Is it 26?
Yeah,
mind-blowing.
Yeah, that's right. And then with the quinoa as well, because when you saw the FDA label, it was from an earlier version. So I think it's more than 30 grams of protein in that lunch. So it's, it's genius. It's amazing. And then I think for example, at home, one of my quick go-to meals is, in that it's so simple, is I take some black beans, some raw, black beans, and rather than soaking them overnight, because I normally never get my act together, I wash them, and then I pour boiling hot water in the kettle over them, and I let them sit. And then again, I make that sofrito, so a bit of onion, a bit of garlic, and I put carrots in there, and put some cumin and some salt. And then when that's ready, I leave the water that the beans have been sitting in. So I've rinsed them beforehand, but then I pour the water and the beans into the pot, and I cook it. And I add some more boiling water, and I cook it slowly for, an hour. And that feeds a family of 6. I made it Sunday night, and with some bread and some avocado on top, and it's an amazing meal. So again, why did I create Plantable? Because at the beginning, it's really hard and it can be overwhelming. But once you get to learn these little tricks, then it becomes easier.
That is so helpful. That last one I want to make tonight. Is it like a soupy consistency then at the end, the black bean one? Yeah, so it's like a soup. So you could put it over quinoa or rice or pasta or whatever you could, if you wanted to add some complex carbs to that. A little bit more. Okay. And then also for people who are thinking we're dying to check this out, they want to test it out, or give it as a gift, because we all have those people in our lives that are like, I don't want to try this. I don't want to try this. They know that it could be an amazing journey, but they're just a little bit afraid. I like giving this kind of thing as gifts to people for their birthday, especially their birthday or another type of date. So, we have a special code at plantable.com. And when you go to order, it is simply put in S4G10. So S, the number 4G, 10. And that is 10% off, and it takes $70 off the reboot package, which is kind of extraordinary. It takes 10% off of everything that you want to order, but that one is quite a smoking deal.
Well, thank you guys for having me, and it's been a delight. And keep up the amazing work you're doing, because I love your podcast. It's my favorite.
And you too. Keep up the great work, spreading the good plant-based whole food word, because it's really helping people.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list, where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.